I am the chair of this committee. Can we go round and introduce committee members, because we're all quite squashed up, and the reason we're in here is because the change the equipment put in there, so that's why we're here for explanation. So if we go around and introduce members of the committee, and as officers are then they can introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Ashley, who is also an officer.
Hi there, I'm Ashley, I'm a Policy Committee Officer.
Councillor Mahmoud Lawrence Ward.
Ellie Freeman, Bedminster Ward.
Shona Jeffrey, Lawrence Hill Ward.
John Glenn Stoke Bishop Ward.
And Giovanni Brisington West Ward.
No, when you speak. Just straight to me. Right? So
We do, just because we're online.
Sue Collar, Bishopsworth Ward.
Perry Bells, Hartcliffe and Witherwood.
Katia Hanshian, Brislington East Ward.
Thank you very much. And can I just ask people when they do speak to speak into the microphone, because this is going out onto the usual public YouTube, and we want people to be able to hear if they're choosing. So welcome to anybody that is watching online. We're not expecting there to be any fire drills. So if there is a fire drill, we will need to exit the building and we go out the main entrance and in front of the cathedral down the bottom of the slope. Thank you very much. Number 2, I'm not aware of any apologies or substitutions for committee members, so thank you very much. We must have a very good we generally get everybody that should be here. Everybody generally on CYP makes themselves available. So thank you very much for that. Anybody got any declarations of interest to any items on the agenda that they feel that they need to declare?
I don't know if we're mentioning 224, but I'm just letting you know that I'm a trustee for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. And item number 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm going to assume that people have had the opportunity to read them. Can I have a seconder to record that as the correct?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Katja Horngren. Thank you. And that takes us on to Chair's announcement, which is item number 5. As we know, Monday last week, the white paper was published, and that included in the part 3 was the SEND reforms, which is a massive piece, probably the biggest piece of legislation or policy review for this Parliament. And we will come on to it later, and we will have lots of opportunities to discuss it, not just today, but it's going to be an ongoing piece of work. So that's my announcement, really, but we will also today have an opportunity to speak to that. So that takes us on to item number 6, which is the public forum. That we've had no questions submitted from members of the public, but we have had one statement, and we've been informed that the person that put that statement is not able to join us. However, we have had it's published on the website, and every member of the committee should have had an opportunity to view that statement. So thank you to that person that put that statement in, and anyone that is watching now or does watch in the future, this committee, we welcome questions and we welcome statements, and we welcome members of the public attending this CYP committee. Thank you. Okay, that takes us on to agenda item number 7, which is our usual for this committee, is our update around with our various pieces of data and sort of what's coming up or what's been particularly successful. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah Woodhouse, our Executive Director for Children, to introduce the paper.
Thank you very much. So, there's a paper in front of you which, as normal, starts off with sort of policy updates, goes into the data, and then issues that we've been working on since the last committee. So it does start off talking about schools white paper, and just puts in a bit of a summary. So Two documents were produced, and also and a couple of further consultations with them. One was a schools white paper document, which is a big policy white paper document, very schools policy, and then it linked into a SEND reform paper, which is much more technically about changes to the funding and legislation for the SEND system, and obviously other. And I mean, I'm sure that this will be a theme that we pick up as we go through this meeting. But I mean, just to summarise, the reforms are very end-to-end. So they start off with early years and they go all the way through curriculum, teaching and learning, behaviour, engagement, workforce, gap narrowing, big focus around gap narrowing, particularly deprivation, but also more broadly areas of the country which are underperforming. It does talk to a system where every school is in a multi-academy trust, which is something we've seen before in policy, and in a system which is inspected, and then it comes back to sort of system leadership. It basically aims to improve inclusion across the education system through every single lever that we have. And so that's what the white paper sort of summarises. And I think there are some sort of, as we absorb it and respond to the consultation, there'll be big questions for us on the schools white paper. And then in the SEND green paper in particular, sorry, the SEND white paper or the SEND reforms, sorry, I'm just looking for my slides, do set out, and we've done a bit of a briefing. I think we are due to do a full members briefing on this as well, that a number of changes in legislation to the role of EHCPs, and EHCPs playing to a group of children with higher needs in specialist provision, but there still being an independent support plan, ISP, for children with SEN in mainstream sector. And basically the thrust of the reforms is about how do we get the system ready for that, so that by the time children become are assessed under the new legislation, they're assessed at a level which is expected through that system. There is additional funding announced, quite significant. It looks like quite a significant amount of funding. Whether it's going to be enough is another question. But funding, in particular, additional funding like a pupil premium, a specialist premium for schools, funding for AP and specialist schools to do more outreach, funding for health teams and local authorities to support teams called Experts at Hand. So basically specialist support for children with special educational needs in the mainstream sector. And obviously with capital funding we've already talked about, we'll talk a bit more about today in the school estate strategy. And then we are expecting a grant which will remove 90% of our deficit in the DSG. So I mean, I've just talked a bit more about those because they are really significant, and we obviously need to respond to the consultation, and we need to start to plan, assuming that the reforms do proceed and go ahead. So that, I mean, that, as you say, that's the biggest bit. That's the bit that we've been waiting for some time. And then you've also we've also seen an announcement around the youth justice system, where, again, very much in the same spirit, a focus on prevention, early intervention, avoiding custody, particular focus around knife crime and youth and serious youth violence in there as well. So there's been some big policy changes in the last month, which are noted in this paper. Meanwhile, through our performance board, our QUIP, we have continued to look at performance of all services across children's and education. As you know, we are expecting at least 3 inspections this year. We don't know when. One of them could be next week. And we are ready for them and we're prepared for them, but we're not waiting. And you know, the officers are ready for them, and you know, we're all looking forward to it. But let's not be surprised when that happens. So we looked in our performance board at elective home education, analysis of children entering and leaving care, and we looked at the delivery of EHCPs and the improvement plan there. So in the papers, summarises, and I won't, you can read for yourself, I think we're all quite used now to looking at the numbers. What we are seeing is the number of, in this data, we're looking at a slight rise in terms of the number of needs assessments, and we're looking at 8% timeliness overall. But what we are seeing in our work generally is more needs assessments being assessed through social care, through education, through the health system quicker, but obviously, as we know, we've got a large number waiting. So we are seeing those being moved forward. I don't know if Vic might want to give us the February data, which is, well, I'll come to you in a minute, but there is some more recent data than that which was available when we produced this paper, which is looking more positive. We continue to, oh, is it? Okay. So there's a noise, just for the camera, there is a noise going on next door. But I'll carry on if that's all right. So we continue as a top priority to improve our work to support children with EHCPs as quickly as we possibly can. And while they are waiting for EHCPs, we are supporting them in school. And we'll talk a bit about the capital programme to provide additional specialist places, which is on the agenda. Elsewhere, we have, you can see from the papers, slight reduction in NEET numbers, and that 129 more young people engaged in the Bristol Youth Guarantee Programme, which is very good. You can also see we are seeing a reduction in number of children missing education, but a rise in elective home education. Attendance continues to be a massive concern for the whole city, and again, I speak for everyone involved in education in this city, including school leaders. Attendance is a really significant concern, and very many live conversations about secondary school attendance in particular, and you know, everything being deployed from national, regional, local support to schools to challenge, to additional resources to tackle attendance. And I know there's been a subgroup of this committee looking at that as well. On to the social care data. Again, you can read for yourselves. What we are seeing is slight rises in the number of children with child protection plans and those coming into care, which it's not showing it specifically in this area, but it has been a focus of our work over the last couple of months, trying to understand whether this is additional need rising, or whether that, you know, how our social care system is supporting to rising level of need, whilst we're also managing to support children with fostering and children's homes at the same time. So, I mean, I won't speak more to the data that's set out in the paper. There's further information as you go through it. Just in terms of, I mean, we can talk to the EHCP improvement plan if it's helpful, and Vic can pick up any questions there. We've obviously got on the agenda the SEN Education Capital Programme and the Joint Commissioning work. We have been doing some work on a piece of work called The Best Start in Life, which is bringing our early years work together with our family hubs, on the premise that, you know, the earlier we are able to support children to achieve, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, the better. This is again, it's a government programme, and an area where we've got targets set. So we are producing the finalised plan by the end of March. We will bring to the next committee an update on youth services. We've had a lot of work going on in youth services, and there's a piece in the paper about the Young Futures programme. I probably will leave it there. We've got fostering on the agenda, and we have on the agenda for next time a paper on our education work in Bristol Future, which is our work with schools and trusts across the city. So we can talk more about that next time. So, but happy to answer any questions on the paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John, Shona, Susan, Kerry. Okay, John, off you go.
Thanks, Chair. Two things, if I may. The first one, well, if I could pick your brains, Hannah, a little bit. I've got in my ward a standalone primary school academy. From what you're saying, are their days limited, do you think? Or do you think they're going to have to merge into a multi-academy trust?
So, yes, I mean, the intention of the white paper was that single academy trust, SATs as they're known, should join multi-academy trusts and there are, I think at the last count, around about 10 single academy trusts in the city. I mean, there is no legislation spelt out to require them, to force them to join MATs, and of course this has been done before. So when we had a white paper under the previous government, they also said this, and they set out that by 2030 every school would be in a MAT. Obviously it was never pushed through in terms of legislation. I haven't seen, obviously it'll be a question about whether in the bill that's coming, will there be a requirement to join a MAT? I think single academy trusts can be very vulnerable because they aren't supported either by the local authority or by the multi-academy trust. So they tend to sit at both ends of the spectrum. They're either very highly performing and therefore everyone leaves them to it, or they're very vulnerable, in which case they get picked up in intervention.
Thanks for that. So it's a wait and see, I think, really, just to see the detail of the paper. The only other thing to say, I mean, the figures that you've provided are the figures, and the attendance figures obviously are very disappointing, and you've commented on that. I don't think there's much more we can say other than to hope and pray that they go in a different direction soon.
Shona?
Thanks. Yeah, I had a few questions. First, I wanted to ask about the Young Futures Hub. I think that's mentioned page 35, which is obviously we've talked about before and is very exciting. Firstly, so I understand it's on track to open this month. Is that right? The hub is on track to open March 2026?
So, I think
Your microphone's not on.
Sorry. So that is what it says in the paper. You're correct. So we have funding from the beginning of April for a programme from the Young Futures programme, which is a Trailblazer programme. We have and have announced a location for the East Central Hub for Young Futures. So I'm not sure I don't know, Heather might be able to know more than me. I think we probably need to correct that.
Yes, I don't think it is opening in March, and I'm not sure where that error came from. We may need to correct that.
Not so much March, but I know the South Bristol Youth Zone opens in June 26, so that might have been a conflation of two things.
Okay, so what's the estimate for the hub then?
So we have, what we're bringing in April is a piece of work which looks at the sort of focus across from the youth zone to the Young Futures Hub, and also the work we're doing in North Bristol, where there also needs to be, I think we all agree, there needs to be some youth provision, and the debate is about the capital for that. So what we're wanting to bring is a sort of what's the plan across those three areas? What about staffing and revenue costs? How does it fit in with social care work? How does it fit in with schools? So we're bringing a general update on all of that work. The funding is for the hub to be open in this financial year, and why don't we make sure that let's make sure in that paper that we're really clear about when it will open and when services will commence.
So by March 2027?
At the latest.
At the latest,
for sure.
Okay. Thank you. I wondered whether you could clarify a bit more about what the local spokes will involve, because that's obviously meant it's going to link into my ward of Lawrence Hill, which desperately needs the youth provision. Everyone's telling us that.
Yeah, so the local spokes will work with existing provision and seek to enhance and grow that provision that already exists in the local area. So it's not opening new kind of capital assets as kind of additional spokes, I suppose, but it's how it works through outreach to expand opportunity through existing provision that exists in the local area already, and to enhance that through kind of training, development work, and make sure that there's a kind of a cohesive, coherent and equitable offer across the area.
So providing more resources and potentially more staffing for the youth groups and clubs that are already in the area.
Correct.
Cool, thank you. Okay, and then my second question was about the elective home education. On page 34, it's talking about most EHE withdrawals have been concentrated in a relatively small number of schools and families talking about the issues they're having. So I wondered what sort of work are we doing, can we do with those schools to tackle the issues those families are noting?
Thank you. Yes, we are. We've been increasing the rate at which we're suitability checking for those children, particularly and we are meeting with schools. It is predominantly in the south of Bristol, and that's where we have seen the highest rise, both in terms of EHE, but also the intersectionality of that with SEND need. And what we are doing, in fact, next week, I'm meeting with schools in the south of Bristol to share some of that feedback with them in terms of the data. And what we're looking at particularly is what was the last known school that those children were on roll at before they became EHE. The other area we're going to be looking at implementing from September is a cooling off period. So opportunity for mediation between schools and families, particularly where the concern relates to things like bullying or things like practices within schools, where there can be opportunities for children and families to mediate, return back to school within that cooling off period. So not taking a child off roll immediately when the EHE request has come in, but actually build a period of time for discussion. So those are some of the things we're looking at the moment.
Thank you. And back to absences. So I note that the percentage of pupils persistently absent has jumped, but the number of children missing education has gone down, which the latter feels good. So what's the relationship between the two? Why one number has gone up and the other number has gone down?
I can speak to them separately. I think I can't speak to a specific correlation between the two. Where a child is missing education, our team will track that very closely, and there are a couple of interventions there. One is so I, with colleagues, chair children in care and children on child protection plans missing education board, where we look very closely at that cohort, and those numbers have been coming down quite well in terms of the interventions. The virtual school particularly has been leading in that, and we have also been doing, again, alongside the EHE work, looking very closely at our children missing education figures, and those are now at the lowest level they've been at for probably a year, again, because of that additional contact and support to get children back into education. So I think that's been part of a kind of concerted effort to look at that cohort particularly. Persistent absence relates more to the practice in schools and the activities in schools, and again, we've been undertaking a number of activities around that, so attendance, practice reviews and peer reviews. There's also some broader work which is being led by one of our trusts to develop the attendance curriculum with our attendance hub, which is also hosted by Cabot Learning Federation, alongside our plans to have a citywide campaign as well. So I think I can't say, I'd have to look further as to whether there's a correlation between the two, but certainly we are looking at the CME cohort very closely, and that also links to our work in alternative provision as well.
To be clear, if you're a CME, you're not on anyone's roll.
Right.
And so the persistent absence measures all those children who are on roll, which is why it can go down while CME continues to also go down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's. I just thought it would be good to try and pull that out, because the data itself sort of wasn't clear on that. But yeah, thank you. And then my last question was, I think last time we talked about the suspension rates for children from priority ethnic groups were disproportionately high, and was seeking an update on that, please.
Yep, so we have that as an outstanding action. We'll be circulating a briefing. I'll follow that up outside of the meeting.
Thank you.
It is correct that Docklands is already open as a youth club, which is what is meant in the paper. So I think the proposal is that it's launched as a hub in March rather than... So I think, you know, the provision exists, they're adding to it, which is why it would already be open in that way, and the additional resources are adding to it. So that is a correct figure. So we were doubting ourselves there.
So it's already open, but extra resources will start going into it from this month. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Can I just remind officers to say your name and your role when you speak, either next and you haven't done so, or you speak for the first time? Thank you. Susan Collar.
So I got a couple of things. Going back to page 28 and 29, looking at the percentages around EHCPs, just getting me head around it because I've had to do maths. Okay, and so looking at the ones that are issued within 20 weeks, I note that the percentage is matching the national average, but in terms of points, I note that we've gone down. However, the ones that have been finalised in the month for the first time has gone up. But there's this plus not 291 for the year to date. So does that mean although some EHCP percentages have gone down, but some have gone up, is that because we're balancing those extra numbers of EHCPs that are coming through? So, of course, at that point, there's going to be obviously a dip in some things, but a rise in others. And is that because of the correlation of the amount of kids we're getting in?
Go on.
I'll try and answer that. There's a couple of things. So if we take the whole of the 2025 calendar year, the service produced 37%. So 37%. Sorry, I should say my name first. Vic Verma, I'm Director of Education. Sorry, Christine. So for the whole of 2025, there was a 37% increase in the number of education, health and care plans finalised by the SEND service in its entirety. So that's more than we have produced in several years. So the service is doing good work in terms of increasing the productivity, but we've got to go further. Because of that significant rise that we saw in 2024, where we had, I think, about 35% more EHCPs requests come in during that period when non-statutory top-up was withdrawn, that has created that pressure in the service. So that persisted for about 18 months in total, pretty much into last year as well. And what we have seen is that pressure did bring down timeliness. But what we are seeing is whilst timeliness is reducing, the actual overall output of the service continues to climb. So we will probably experience challenges around timeliness for some time, probably for a lot of this calendar year, while we work through that backlog. But our kind of key driver here is two things. I think one, making sure that we are finalising more plans that are coming in, and that's where our improvement plan comes into place. But also that we continue to see requests remain at a similar level to where they are at the moment, and we're tracking that. And I think at the moment the figures which aren't in this report, because we report slightly lagged, is that timeliness for January for the calendar month was 13%, with 94 plans issued in total, and then for February, which has just ended, timeliness increased to 25%. With 110 plans issued. So the service is continuing to drive forward improvement in that area.
That's kind of what I thought my number showed, but I just wanted to check because I think it's important to recognise that sometimes there may be that pressure on the service, but if we are getting a lot more young children coming through with EHCPs, there's got to be that kind of patience that needs to go with that, because obviously as a service there's that kind of limitation to how many children we get in and how many HCPs that we can get out in a timely manner. But overall, everything else is like going up. So we're balancing it all out.
And I think just to add, we know we have a huge amount more to do here, and we're going to have to sustain this performance for the whole of this calendar year to get beyond the backlog. And my hope is that, in January 2027, we're in a space where the backlog has subsided to a level that the service can manage then in a normal space, but it's going to be a significant activity. We also, working with the Bristol Parent Care Forum, there are two things. I think one, we've been communicating with families, and the recent survey we did with families showed that they, for those that responded, in the main, they do understand the pressure on the service and they empathise with that, but they, of course, are keen to see it progress. But communication is improved, but also on our local offer, What we do in readiness for each of these committees is a short parent-friendly update of the things we are discussing in this meeting. So again, families get an understanding for full transparency as to what we are doing to improve performance.
Lovely, thank you. And I got another question. I'm going to skip through to page 39. Bear with me a minute. This one is about, let me get 39, come on. Oh no, that's next time, don't worry. Yeah, that's what I'm scrolling and it won't go past 38. No, that's the next one, so don't matter, that you've answered my question for now.
Yeah, this is going to come back at the timeliness. The impact of how schools, families and the system respond to what they might anticipate might come out with the SEN reforms is something that is beyond sort of what we can predict really as a council. It's going to be interesting to see. When the top up was removed, it took a couple of months to see the impact of that, because that's how long usually it takes for schools and Senkos and families to get to the point where they can put an application in. So we wouldn't expect necessarily to see the impact 2 weeks later or less than 2 weeks later. However, the other side of Easter, we might start to see the applications coming in go up again. But that is just how it is, unfortunately, and that is something that is beyond our control. But we will respond to that and keep an eye on it, and as a committee we'll keep on top of it, and at quality and improvement we'll also be looking at it. And I know Vic Verma looks at this, I'd imagine that he spends quite a large part of his time thinking and looking and monitoring what's going on in this particular element of the service. Okay. Councillor Bales.
So I wanted to ask about the number of children electively home educated that are waiting for needs assessment, because further down in the report it says there are 775 electively home educated children at the end of December, an increase of 40 children from the previous month and from the previous year. That includes 41 children with an EHCP. So how many of them are waiting for EHCPs, and is that why they're missing education? And I wanted some more information on the number of contacts to First Assessment Service, the number of referrals to Children's Social Care, and the % of repeat referrals to Children's Social Care within 12 months.
Okay, Vic, I'm assuming you can take the first element, and then Fiona, I think, are you able to take the second about the repeat referrals? Thanks.
Yeah, so that's correct that there are 775 home educated children in total. The 41 with an EHCP will be those with an issued EHCP, not those awaiting an EHCP. Yep.
How many of them are have applied or are waiting to hear? Or
I think it's not in this report, but it's probably information we can share after the committee if helpful.
I just wanted some more information on the number of contacts to First Assessment Service, the number of referrals to Children's Social Care, and the % of repeat referrals to Children's Social Care within 12 months. It's just under the elective home education bit on the chart.
Yeah, that's fine. Hello, Fiona Tudge, Director of Children and Families. So the number of contacts is anybody, whether that's a professional, health visitor, school, a family member, a child themselves, calling our First Assessment Service. Our First Assessment Service works and receives calls for all children across Bristol for all level of concern. So when we talk about contact, we talk about people who are calling and don't meet the kind of the statutory threshold for a social work response, but may receive maybe at the threshold for our early help response, or might be redirected to our universal services. So those contacts are everybody who's making contact, but the numbers of referrals are those that have met the threshold for going into our social work units. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the amount of the amount of contacts have gone up, but the ones that are then taken forward has gone down.
Yeah.
So what happens to the ones that it doesn't meet any kind of criteria to?
There will always be something. So we don't have kind of a no further action on ours. So when people are calling up, they might be referred into our targeted support service. So that's where our family support workers, parenting practitioners are for a number of support services. They might be redirected into universal services, and advised to go kind of back to a children's centre, or they might be given information at that point. There are specific kind of early help coordinators who sit at our front door who have kind of more specialist knowledge about resources and support available to families. So at the very least there would be kind of advice and assistance for those people calling, but they could be redirected to other services. A referral is a referral that would meet a threshold for kind of a social work intervention, but there's lots of other support services that we offer or can direct people to. And the re-referrals is we track that because this is into children's social care, and this is important to us because we want to make sure if we are supporting a family through the social work teams, we want to make sure that when we end our involvement, that support that's sustained for the family, that they can continue with those improvements and that there aren't concerns again. So we measured to see if there are referrals that come back to us, and that we want to kind of understand why that is. We want to keep those as low as possible. The national, we are still below the national benchmarking, so we benchmark to make sure that we kind of are looking similar to other local authorities. So we still sit below other local authorities in the numbers that are returning. But we analyse some of what those issues are, and sometimes those issues are completely new and unpredictable, and have come back for different reasons. And sometimes they come back, and sometimes if they come back within 3 months of us ending our involvement with them, they go back to the same social work team. And sometimes social work team doesn't need to open them again and offer a service. They can just say, we've got a safety plan, you know what your safety plan is, we understand your context, it's okay, keep going, and that's okay. And sometimes we'll come back in and do a short piece of intervention. But we want to measure that because we want to know that the improvements are being sustained for our children and families.
Okay, any other members got any other questions or comments on this? Katja.
I just had one comment to the report. I've got to find it here. At the level of employment, which was at 58%, rather low, disappointing. And it also sits on the scrutiny panel as well, and their rate for employment is just in the early time, but is that low as well. Their risk of being needs. Is there anything that's happening to help this cohort of young people achieve and life?
Is that for Carrie? I don't know. Sorry, Fiona.
We've got Carrie, the head of Carrie Yates, head of service for the service, with us for the other items. So if you want to step in.
Yeah, so I'm head of permanence and specialist services. So care leavers sits in my service, and we are very aware of our data around employment, education and training. So we're doing a big piece of work at the moment to review all of the young people who are NEET, and to understand, are there areas we need to provide more support in? Are there specific areas that we need to understand? So actually we benchmark relatively well nationally in terms of our numbers of we perform well, but we can see that the curve is starting to dip a little bit for us in Bristol. So although we perform well against other local authorities, it's slightly low, coming down slightly from where we were previously. So we should this month be getting the outcome of the report and the piece of work to really explore what is driving that and what are the areas we need to focus and work, and then we'll make an action plan around that to try and improve.
Because one of the things I worry about of age group is how hard it is to get a job for young people nowadays, all the hoops they have to jump through, and I think they might find it even harder. Whether employers, we are working with employers perhaps to, I don't know.
Yeah, so we do lots of work both with young people and then with DWP and with our 16 plus services to really look at what are the best things we can do to get young people into education, employment and training. We're also really trying to be aspirational for our young people. So we've worked with a partner, a consultant partner who's come in and done some work with our young people, both around readiness for university, but also for those young people who are in university, actually, what are your next steps and where could you go on to? So we're really trying to focus and make sure we're promoting young people being in education, employment and training and working out where we need to focus that work. So hopefully the outcome of the piece of work we're doing at the moment to understand will help us really focus in on what are the bits we need to solve to help turn that kind of curve of data around and make sure young people are getting the opportunities.
I'm going to follow up with a question. So that will come to corporate parenting panel for us to sort of look at and scrutinise. My further question, I suppose, because the care leavers are, that group will be impacted, I'm assuming, by a number of asylum-seeking care leavers who are not able to work because their cases are yet to be dealt with by the Home Office. Is that also within that cohort?
Yeah, so and what we'll do is make sure we're exploring within that piece of work actually what is the impact of those young people on that cohort, because actually initially we thought that that might be having a positive impact on some of our education, employment and training figures, because quite a significant number of that cohort were in education, but we also know there are issues around work sort of post 18 for our older care leavers. So yeah, we absolutely will be exploring for the whole cohort and then for both groups within that.
Yeah, did you have a further question? Sorry, I think you did.
Yeah, I found what I was looking for earlier, and it wasn't on page 36 at all, or 39. It was number 24 on 34, where it says an update about the elective home education through the Children's Bill, giving local authorities greater oversight of elective home education. So obviously for me, that is something that we've had raised in our committees previously, and it's something that has always been a little bit of a concern for myself with regards to having that safeguarding to children in home. So what I'm sort of like looking at is when we gain those stronger powers with safeguarding concerns exist, and it introduces home assessments and visiting requirements and stuff like that. Is that something that we as a committee will be looking at in the future?
Yes, I think the main change for us in this space is the register particularly, and I think most local authorities have some form of register already, which is voluntary, but gives us, again, as we are able to report on some of that EHE data already, it will become then a statutory duty. I think the key change which we'll see, what comes through in the bill, will be, I suppose, whether there's a much firmer definition of suitability of education. At the moment, there is not a definition. There is a expectation in statute that says education must be suitable, and the local authority has a role in that, but it doesn't then go on to define suitable. So it's subjective as to how that's delivered. If that goes further, that will give us greater opportunity to make sure that the education those children are, is getting is both suitable, but also not causing challenges in terms of their safeguarding and SEN, for example.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, we are looking at elective home education, and we are tracking it, and we've had answers to questions earlier. But what we don't get is specific funding from the Department of Education in order to do that. So this hopefully will become a statutory requirement for the local authority, and local authorities will then have that additional funding in order to make sure that that authorities are in a position to properly fund that. So that is going to be a positive for us, because it's largely what we're already doing. Is there anybody else that wishes to ask about this paper? Okay, thank you, everybody. As always, really good and challenging questions. Some really good scrutiny coming in. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to agenda item number 8, which is the SEND Joint Commissioning Strategy for 26 to 30. And I'm going to invite Gail Rogers to introduce the paper. And then if you just introduce yourself, Gail, in your role. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm Gail Rogers. I'm the head of Children's Commissioning. So we're looking for approval for the SEND Joint Commissioning Strategy. It was co-produced by a working group with BCC, the ICB, Wessel and Bristol Parent Carers. It's really a document that pulls together, it kind of aligns and underpins the Bristol SEND and Inclusion Strategy and our Children and Education Plan. So it commits to the vision, aspirations and approaches to commissioning of SEND services within those priorities. And it looks to achieve inclusion and improve outcomes for children with SEND. It's describing really our commissioning process and opportunities for working with partners at each stage of that commissioning cycle, including co-production, co-design and engagement. It describes how we're going to work with Bristol, with children and with Bristol Parent Carers in line with the local area co-production charter and the Memorandum of Understanding. Sets out shared principles and values for working together, and it includes the key findings as well from recent surveys that we've done with young people and parents and carers of children about SEND services and the key challenges that they see. So it's looking ahead to our future commissioning activity that we have on our schedule at the moment, which will be subject to this way of working, and it gives us a timetable for upcoming commissioning projects, and that's across that partnership. Each commissioning project undertaken from the strategy will follow the appropriate decision route and would have an equality impact assessment to ensure we're identifying all equality issues and record how they'll be mitigated. And we do some of the things on the timetable for commissioning are joined up with other local authorities, and particularly the ones in the BNSSG footprint. So we do that to drive efficiencies, reduce costs through economies of scale, and particularly it allows some of the smaller organisations to be commissioned across wider areas so that services are more sustainable for them. So that's I wanted to point out as well that although the commissioning strategy for 26-2030 is what you'll see documented, it will be a live document, so it will be published, but there will be iterations published, and there is the group that put it together will continue to meet, probably on a bi-monthly basis, and so things that are kind of important coming up, so SEND reforms, a lot of the changes that we might anticipate seeing across the commissioning landscape will come into that group as well for discussion, and then the governance of that going up through the SEND and AP board. So any questions?
Okay, thank you. So the appendices obviously is where the strategy is. This is a key decision. So we will be taking a vote on this, but are there any, Susan, shown up?
Page 39. So mine is just about in the evidence. Sorry?
More maths.
It was more maths. I did more maths.
Okay.
I was really focused on this tonight. It says in evidence base 1 about 70,000 plus children enrolled in Bristol schools and 15,000, almost 15,500 children with SEN. But of these, 11,000 were receiving SEND support, and my maths all matched yours. It was really good, actually. I was quite chuffed. And I wasn't sure initially if that was of the 70,000, but worked out that the 11,000 with SEN and the 3,550 with EHCP matched the 15,000. But it also made me question, now, when a child gets EHCP, they get funding. When a child has SEN, they don't necessarily get funding. So my question is, as an authority, there is that element of who is paying for what, in terms of if a child with SEN who doesn't yet have an EHCP or doesn't even require an EHCP but still needs SEN support, that SEN support could be anything, and it may not have a financial need. But I also am aware that when EHCPs are given to children, that sometimes that money gets shared around a little bit so that it enhances the whole classroom experience. But if we're not paying for SEN support, because we're not given money to pay for that SEN support, how are we, the money for EHCPs isn't ring-fenced. So is that a way that, because we have to provide funding of our own for SEN, that we're failing kids on EHCPs? But then you've also got the pupil premium with free school meals. How does that all kind of come into a classroom in terms of that kind of funding money, enabling teachers to do the best that they can by the schools?
It's a really brilliant question, actually, and it's partly for some of us kind of more geeky in the education space. Following the funding flows is, once you've learned it, it's a bit like learning a language. You feel a sense of achievement with it. So for children with EHCPs, it's slightly more straightforward because the funding follows the child. It's awarded to the school based on the level of need and that assessment, and that funding is then attached to that child's education. For children that are supported through free school meals or identified on the SEN support register, schools receive a formulaic pot of funding. So a small primary might receive funding of, say, £2 million, but within that will be the core element that is per pupil, which is called the ORPU funding, AW, age-weighted pupil, I forget what the U is, and that is the core funding that funds the heating, lighting, the teachers, the support staff. In addition to that, so it's kind of like a cake with layers, there's then a layer of funding that is formulaic for the number of children that are on free school meals at the census point, which is then kind of formulaic and provides some additional top-up. And then there's what's called the SEN notional budget, which is again at the census point and is approximately £6,000 per pupil. So holistically, it's then up to schools how to use that to support the different needs. Some of those might be individual interventions, some might be group interventions where they're putting on something for a larger group of children who are supported through free school meals or have SEN, but it's given to schools as a pot, so they're accountable for how they use it, but it's mostly in there. And I suppose when we're thinking about the reforms, it's likely to be those pots that are increased to help schools deliver that better. I don't know if that answers all the question, but
yeah, no, that is really good. That is really good, and obviously. That is really good. And obviously the EHCP funding is very much tied to the needs of the child with the EHCP. So for some children with the EHCP, it might be a smaller payment, but somebody that will end up going to a school with that is that intense, that kind of really extra needs school would be getting a higher level of funding. And then the children that would also include home to school travel and stuff like that. So all of that or is that a separate fund again?
It is separate funding again. I'm going to try not to complicate it. So the point about EHCPs is so where a child might have, say, 2 days a week of teaching assistant support and another might have 3, it's not unusual, obviously, for a school to put that funding together and employ one to cover that. So in the main, funding follows the child, and that's the principle. And then schools will obviously, deliver that provision within that funding. Transport is a separate needs-led assessment process. So again, it's not an automatic eligibility for families, and it depends on a number of criteria. And it's then funded directly through one of 2 or 3 routes. So either we would commission transport for families, and that's through Gail's team, or occasionally parents and carers like to use their own vehicles, in which case it's a personal budget, which is a mileage allowance. There's a really positive piece of work happening in terms of investment in independent travel training, and again, that's all part of wanting more young people to use public transport. We also know for some young people that's not appropriate, and actually the transport links aren't strong enough at this point, so there's a balance in terms of how we look at that. But that follows a separate pot, so I'll try not to complicate the kind of the fun we have in terms of unpicking funding pots. So.
That was really good. I really understood that.
I'm going to add to it because I'm going to talk about the dedicated schools grant, because the other element of what goes into schools and how schools are funded is within the dedicated schools grant, and it's within the school block. That is where we have a tiny amount of local kind of flexibility about where we choose to invest that school block, because it's for the local authority to make that decision. And what has happened in Bristol for a good number of years is that funding has maximised what they call the additional educational needs, and that includes low prior attainment, which largely will scoop up children with additional needs. Not entirely, but largely. And year on year, that has been maximised within the regulations, basically, that's been set out by the Department of Education at a local level. So I'm confident that, and I was the chair of the school forum for a number of years, I'm confident that we have done what we can within that school block to maximise our investment in the children we know to be the most vulnerable and disadvantaged when it comes to achieving their potential. And that's all we're doing, what it is that we are able to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this looks really positive, particularly the work with Bristol Parent Carer Forum. My question, so I had a few questions again. One was page 49 about the EQIAs. Will those include children in care / care leavers as a protected characteristic?
Yes, we will include those as protected characteristic.
Brilliant, thank you. Oh, it's mentioned, sorry. It's mentioned in one further down. Thank you, just wanted to clarify. Then page 51, talking about the Children in Care Council. I just wondered if you could, as one of the groups that sort of is going to help shape and inform the commissioning process, I wonder if you could maybe explain a bit more about what that is, what that looks like, and sort of the age ranges involved.
So I probably need to go away and get the information about the age ranges involved, but it's a group of children in care. So all our children in care are invited to be part of the Children in Care Council and supported. They meet regularly, consult on various things, and also just do nice activities and kind of, come together as a group. So we've been out, we go out and consult with them regularly, ask for their input, and they are a really useful source of information and really help shape, and we really want to make sure that's central to sort of shaping our policy and practice.
Thank you. And roughly how many children are on that?
I'd need to go away and check the numbers, but I can check the detail of how many children engage.
Cool. Thank you. And then on page 54, I think it talks about support for emotionally based school avoidance and what is needed. What does that look like? What have we already got in place? What are we thinking is needed moving forward to help those parents and children and carers who are struggling to go to school for emotional reasons?
Sorry, it's Gail. I'm struggling to see that we, as for those children, the EBSA children. So I know parent carers as well would say that that's a priority, and we're looking at how we can support, for example, through the short breaks programme, and that's predominantly what we built into the programme for the commissioning strategy.
And parent. Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, and parent carers, is that what they're saying they want to support? That's the sort of support they're wanting for EBSA?
I'm a wider range of support I think parents are saying they want for that, so across the partnership, so support with that emotional and mental health through community-based mental health services, support to help their children engage in education. Do you want to come in, Vic?
Yeah, thank you. There's a few areas there. I think firstly, the ICB have the mental health in schools teams, which are working, I think, in about 70% of our schools at the moment, which is that first layer of support for children that are in education. And generally, we've had good feedback about that in terms of a pre-CAMS support, particularly noting that CAMS pressure is significant, and a different approach is needed around that. So I'd say that's part of it. We also fund the Enable Trust through a service level agreement to work in a targeted approach using education psychologists to work with that cohort. So there's a couple of areas there. In addition, we've also just withdrawn what was a previous charging policy for our Bristol Hospital Education Service, where schools would pay a contribution towards that, and we've removed that so that schools can now access that more freely as well. So those are some of the smaller interventions that we have been doing across the city. Over the next few weeks and in readiness for September, we will be publishing, and at the moment kind of draft title is a Children Not in Education policy, or Children Not in School policy, which will cover all manner of children who are both from persistent absence through to exclusion, suspension, emotion-based school avoidance. And the feedback we've had from families in recent survey work we've done is they can see that there's lots of offers, but they seek two things. One, clarity of what is the pathway, so where do you start and where does it then take you when you need support, but also recognition that actually if there isn't an offer for some children, that professionals are clear rather than families bouncing around the system. So we are doing some work on that policy to really set it out in a way that families can see a very clear map of where do you go, where is there an offer, where is there not an offer, and that's a bit of work we're doing with Bristol Parent Care Forum at the moment.
Cool. Thank you. Cool. And then my next question was about the SEND mediation, which is mentioned page 57, I think, about the service that provides mediation and dispute resolutions for children and families. I wondered sort of if we have any data on like how successful it is, like how many people pick it up, what's the satisfaction rate, that because obviously SEND is can be an area of massive disagreement between schools and carers.
Yeah, I don't have data on that, on how successful it is, but it's in our priority recommissioning, and it's really critical that we have it. I understand that it's that can we commission that across a wider region as well, rather than Bristol, because it's a small group. But I understand that it's really effective across the region. I can get the data and bring it, supply it for commission.
Cool. Thank you. And then I think my final question was on page 71, and my maths must not be as good as yours tonight, Susan, because this one didn't make sense to me, but I think that's just me. It was about the SEN and sex and the difference between children who are male and female. And it was saying that 64% of young people with SEN were male and 35% were female, but then across England the proportions are very similar. Are you saying that the proportions are similar to what we're seeing in Bristol, or that it's sort of more 50-50 across England? I think that's what I was confused about.
Yeah, I think it's suggesting that it's pretty similar to the national picture.
Right, okay, and that we're not sure, yeah, it says it's not sure whether that's because it's less common in girls or it's just not recognised in girls. So Okay, that's fine. That clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Katja, yeah.
Shona asked one of the questions I was going to ask about the girls and the boys, the percentages and the percentage difference. But the other one that just came to me now was when you were talking about the Youth Council, the Children in Care Council, Listening Partnership, etc., etc. We on this committee wanted to have more involvement with young people's voices on our committee talking to us. And I wondered if some of these would be a route in. I'm not suspecting that they should come to our committee meetings, but there could be a way for some of us to represent the committee and then get feedback or something, so that we're also hearing their voices, because I think that's something that's been missing also in our working group. That's been missing, and that's, I feel that very sorely. I'm sure others do in the committee as well.
So shall I? I'll take that one, shall I? So the Youth Council, as you know, has just refreshed itself. So they've just had a re-election. So they are currently in their kind of induction period, getting to know you sort of period. And it's an opportunity for us to speak with them about how it is that they would best like to engage with us. And the youth worker that the officer that leads on that is coming to when all of that period is kind of, when all that really busy stuff is finished, she's going to come and she's going to do a presentation to the policy chairs. And I've suggested that we also do one for this committee. And at that point, I think it's for us to shape how is it that we wish to engage with our youth council. How do they want to engage with us? Because that we know that they meet in the three localities on a couple of times a year, and so as ward councillors, you know, we can boost our attendance, but we can also boost all of our other ward councillors in those areas and encourage people to go and listen to and hear what it is that our youth council and the young people that they will have at those sessions, what their discussion and what they're talking with each other about. So I think that it is for us and them to shape it. It's just a question of putting a framework in, really. And the first bit of that is kind of on its way. And talking about the youth council, there is a seat for one of our from Child and Care Council on that Bristol Youth Council. So we've got there's certain kind of representation that goes into the Youth Council, and one of those is Children in Care. Somebody from the Children in Care Council has a seat on there. Okay. Anybody else got any? Okay, so I'm going to read. So we need to. This is a key decision because obviously because of the funding levels and because it's across the city. So I need to read out the. So we are asked to approve the SEND Joint Commissioning Strategy for 2026 to 30 for publication. So can I'm going to move the report. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Okay, Katja, hang on a second. Okay. So can I ask all those in favour of the recommendation to please raise their hands? Okay, so that's unanimous, noting that Yasin is out for doing. Thank you. So 8 out of 9 without Yasin in the brief. Thank you very much. So no against and no abstentions. Which takes us on to agenda item number 9, which is the Fostering Sufficiency Capital. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval to help us with our fostering sufficiency adaptations and extensions policies. So this is, kind of in fitting with what we're trying to do in terms of support our foster carers around retention, around recruitment, but also put us in a better position where we are best able to meet the needs of our children locally and within families. And I'm going to invite Carrie Yates to present the report. Thanks.
Thanks. So, yeah, as Councillor Townsend said, this request is for the committee to approve the Fostering Sufficiency Adaptations and Extensions Policy, to approve the use of 3.22 million Invest to Save capital funding to deliver the foster carer capital grant scheme, and to approve the Executive Director for Children and Young People in consultation with the chair of this committee to spend the allocated capital funds as outlined in the report that you've all seen. So Bristol City Council have a legal duty under the Children Act 1989 to ensure there's enough suitable accommodation for children who need to live in care, and that includes having enough foster homes to meet children's needs locally. We know that unfortunately fostering capacity isn't keeping pace with demand, both locally and nationally, and as a result, the council are increasingly reliant on placements with either private fostering agencies or sometimes children's homes, often outside of Bristol and often much more expensive than our in-house fostering options. It also takes children away from their families, their schools, their communities. So our plans are, so external children's homes account for a large proportion of our care costs, so we know that, and we know that the number, unfortunately, of foster carers approved by the council's fallen. The number of children needing care has continued to rise, and if we don't take action, then we not only will struggle to meet children's needs locally, but we'll also see further increasing costs. So this project is really timely. It aligns with upcoming national reforms that have just been published, which focus on increasing the number of fostering spaces nationally. And the government's recently announced 88 million of funding for fostering reforms, with up to 25 million of capital funding available specifically around this, enabling adaptation and extensions to homes to increase fostering sufficiency. And when we know more detail about what that looks like and how we can apply for that funding, we absolutely will be. So this project's part of our fostering work stream under our Families First programme. And the overall goal of the work stream is to grow Bristol's fostering community so our children in care can stay closer to home. And this part of this project within the work stream is the project that delivers tangible additional spaces for children in Bristol. So the proposal introduces a capital grants and loan scheme for foster carers under the Fostering Sufficiency Adaptations and Extension Policy. So the scheme will provide funding to foster carers to either adapt or extend their homes, or to contribute towards the purchase of a more suitable home. And this will be where it will enable either a carer to care for an additional child, or to continue caring for a child whose needs are no longer met by their current accommodation, and that's causing a stability risk. So the target of this project is to deliver 22 additional spaces over 5 years, and to create stability for 7 children who would otherwise have to move where accommodation issues are creating instability. So we've done loads of work to look at what we think will work here. Funding will only be approved where it directly supports the foster care capacity or placement stability. Grant awards will range from a minimum of 20,000 to a maximum of 200,000. And again, there's been loads of research into what is a realistic amount of money to ensure that we can deliver the additional space required. So foster carers receiving a grant under the scheme will need to enter a grant agreement confirming their commitment to foster a Bristol child for a minimum of 5 years. A huge amount of research and risk mitigation has been built into the arrangements, both for the council and for foster carers, and there'll be really close benefits monitoring. So for carers who own their own home, the grant will be secured with a legal charge on their property. And there'll be arrangements if the carer stops fostering within 5 years or reduces their fostering capacity, that some level of repayment will be required. Carers, because we know that's a huge commitment, carers are required to obtain legal advice before entering into that, so that we can be sure that they're protected, as well as us having safeguards on the investment. And there'll be a really clear and structured assessment process. There'll be a 2-stage assessment process. to make sure that we're making decisions and allocating the funds, the grants to carers where we can see that this is a very likely to progress in the way we want it to additional spaces. So for tenants in council-owned properties, a legal charge can't be applied, but we would again go through a clear process to mitigate risks and ensure that there's endorsement from fostering team managers, supervising social workers, and they'll also be reviewed through cross-departmental processes with representatives from legal, finance, housing, corporate landlords and capital portfolio management. Office will kind of manage that process. We'll also make sure that any requests for council properties will be assessed in line with making best use of stock policy. So we'll make sure there are really clear delivery and oversight arrangements in place which ensure quality and value for money of the builds, and approved works will be managed by capital construction project manager. There'll be close oversight and regular reporting through benefits reporting, and that will take place monthly through benefits monitoring group and also through existing performance reporting in the fostering and kinship service, where we're looking at the number of spaces we have available. Because we know this is a significant amount of investment, we're trialling over the first year, and then at the end of the first year we'll review the process before opening up to year 2 applications, making sure that we are delivering the benefits that we hope to. And as you'll see in the paper, over the 5 years we expect to make a net saving of 937,000, and that's based on us providing the additional capacity and meaning we can step down one child from an out-of-area children's home. So I'm aware there's lots more information in the report, but I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I'm just going to come straight up there and then Susan, but this will be overseen. We will come back to this on the corporate parenting panel as well. So but Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is quite an exciting project, actually. It seems like a really good way of increasing the amount of foster care spaces we have in our city and also improving our housing stock as well at the same time. And it's good to see that you've put checks and balances in place for the application process. So I think one of the fears I had was that people might have a lovely new extension and think, oh, I don't want to be a foster care anymore. And obviously we can't have that happening, and there are checks and balances to prevent that from happening. The one concern I did have, and I think I mentioned it before in an earlier briefing, is the cost overruns associated with home adaptations. You know, when you have work done on your house, it's always more expensive than you think it is. And I'm just worried how we can keep an eye on the cost of individual adaptations to make sure it doesn't overrun, because then, of course, we risk not having the number of foster care spaces that we wanted.
Yeah. I'll hand over to Bevan, who's the project manager.
Hi, I'm Bevan Gohuli. I'm the project manager for the Fostering Sufficiency project. So as Carrie kind of alluded to in the paper, we've got a kind of dedicated capital delivery team, which consists of both a construction project manager and also our development manager from corporate landlord. And they provide a quality assurance role to any kind of feasibility proposals or anything like that comes through from the consultant architects. So there's kind of there's multiple assurances before we get to the point where we actually commit to a project, and that will be all around the costings as well. And they will support and manage the consultants throughout that. And we've also built a very kind of healthy contingency into each of our project cost estimates, based on kind of support and advice from the corporate landlord as well. So hopefully within that there's enough to kind of cover any external kind of exceeding costs.
Yeah, I think a contingency is a good idea, because you don't know what's underneath your plaster until you start stripping it off. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
And John?
Thanks very much, Chair. I think I'll echo a lot of what Andrew has said, actually. This is exciting, innovative, intelligent. It's brilliant, actually. We desperately need more foster carers. We need them desperately. And the report is very clear what the risk mitigants are as well. I've read it carefully. My only slight concern is that the press may be a bit lazy in terms of their media reading and may latch onto just one bit, how to get £200,000 to improve your house. There's a lot more to it. So I think we'll have to be clever with our press releases just to make it clear that actually this is a net saving for the council. But it's more than just saving money, it's actually providing places for our children in care in Bristol in a family setting. I mean, this really is win-win-win all round. I mean, it's really exciting. It's really good. The report does have all the mitigants. It's very, very detailed. But I've got a feeling that the press won't read the full report. So we might have, as I say, we have to be clever with our press release to emphasise the fact that it's good value, it's good. You know, we need to stress the good points, I think, so that the press actually pick up on those. And the only thing, which I think Andrew has covered, actually, I think you've given me some confidence, it's not just the cost overruns, it's the hassle of building works. You know, if the people have not ever done an extension, it's a nightmare. So they may need a bit of hand-holding, not just on the cost front, but just to make sure that, you know, it actually works for them, because things do go wrong, unfortunately. But yeah, very exciting, very supportive of this. This is really good.
Shona?
Yeah, we're starting to sound like a broken record, but I think it's brilliant. My background's in fostering in Baines, and Baines Council actually approved a very similar thing at Cabinet last month, but I think this is even more progressive, because this covers not just extra spaces for children who might otherwise go to residential, but it explicitly mentions about improving the stability for children who are already in placement. You know, you might have two siblings sharing a room, and then as they become teenagers, that's no longer appropriate, and they need an extra bedroom. So where do they go? It would be completely disproportionate for one of them to move to a different foster placement or even go into a residential home. We know that it's incredibly traumatic and stressful and triggering for children who don't need a residential placement to be forced into there because there's no other foster placements available. Yeah, this is really, really impressive. My one question was about, it mentions that we're expecting in the next year for it to include 2 habitable garden rooms. And I just wanted to clarify what age range of young people would be staying in those garden rooms, because obviously a garden room being separate to the main body of the house, it wouldn't be appropriate for a young child to be living in that room.
So I think we probably haven't got like a strict age range criteria, but as part of our kind of assessment process and panel, alongside that is when we start matching children into those newly created places, and that will be in line with our kind of BAU processes, but ensuring that it's a very strong match, it's the right home for them, and all of those considerations will be taken into place before we would consider placing someone there.
And also, it wouldn't necessarily be the child that's going into the garden room. So there might be an adult child in the house who might move into the garden room to free up a space. So we absolutely would be making sure we're making safe arrangements for whichever child is moving.
Yeah, I think this is brilliant. This is going to prevent trauma for children, and it's also going to save the council money. So I think this is, yeah, really important. Thank you.
And I'm really glad you picked up on the stability thing, because I think that's really important, and exactly how you described it is right, that it will mean that we can keep siblings together.
As well as potentially looking at like enabling people to even purchase a larger house, which I don't think Baines have covered either. So I think we're really ahead of the curve on this one. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to, I knew I'd read it. We have put some communication out, and the post online has picked it up. And pretty much it's as we would have liked it to have looked like, shall we say. I won't comment on the journalistic nature of that, but yeah, okay. I mean, it's as we would want it to have been. Ellie?
Yeah, a few very small, I'm obviously in support of it, as for all the reasons that everybody's mentioned already. I wondered whether you had any concerns about disruption. I mean, obviously this is something that happens anyway, but disruption to those households that are having that work, and how you sort of mitigate that, because you might sort of lose a foster carer while that's happening.
I mean, I think that's part of all the really careful planning that's built into this, so that we can minimise the disruption. And we do have experience of works in some of our children's homes, and we have done 2 sort of pilot projects earlier a few years ago, so we have got some learning from those about how we manage them. But you're right, there is a bit of preparing everybody for there is likely to be a bit of disruption in the household, and that will be part of our planning process as well, and our making sure that we feel like the family have got the resilience to kind of move through that process too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, having had work done on my house, washing up in the shower. Yeah. And I was going to ask about whether other councils have done this. It's really interesting to hear about Baines. Have we got any other examples, or is this quite a sort of, are we a bit of an outlier?
I mean, we are a bit ahead of the curve. So there are other councils starting to do this. And as I was saying, the fostering reforms, there is definitely now a drive from government setting out exactly this as a sort of way forward, innovative way forward. So we are a bit ahead of the curve, but people will be following in our footsteps, and there are some councils who've already done so.
Great. And I was going to ask as well about that money, and you said, you know, we would go for it once it comes down the line. Would that mean that we could increase the number of people that could apply for it? Like, what would that mean in practice for us if we had more money in this pot?
And I think partly we have been fairly careful about making sure we can track progress through the first year, because although you can see it's a really carefully thought out, evidenced project, there will be some considering how it is in reality when it starts happening. So I think it will then be actually, what does it look like? Is this about us doing more, or is it about us using that money to sort of offset some of what we're already doing?
And I did Susan, yeah.
Mine was about the different types of fostering. So if we were talking about adaptations to a home, and it says about fostering for up to 5, it must foster for 5 years. Is that fostering the same child for those particular reasons, or is it fostering of however many children that home needs? And with the adaptations, with the fostering, is there a difference between somebody who wants to foster 0 to 5, somebody who wants to foster slightly older and slightly older? And then there's also the length of time, because obviously there are occasions when you have like emergencies, like we just need to put this baby somewhere for one night kind of thing. Mum's been taken into hospital or something. And the way that those adaptations fit those different types of fostering and the needs that are out there.
Yeah, so it is about the number of spaces. So it doesn't have to be the same child, but it could be the same child for the whole 5 years. And what we know is that we know that a lot of our very experienced foster carers, who we know are very able and able to provide stable homes for young people, are likely to put themselves forward for this, and that will enable us to create extra spaces that might be for those sort of emergencies and might help lots and lots of children, or might mean that one child stays for the longer term. And we also know that we need fostering spaces for children of all different ages. But as we're going through the process of prioritising, there might be some balancing to do there. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add, Bevan. You don't have to. You don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah, so the point I'm sort of like looking for is we're not just talking about one child in one house for 5 years. We're talking about a number of children. Yeah. So we're not just talking about supporting 1 or 2 children. We're looking at supporting
absolutely
a massive range of children by providing these sort of adaptations and making it easier for people to actually foster.
Absolutely.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments? Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just one quick one. You mentioned this first year is going to be a trial year. So how many adaptations or how many houses do you think you will adapt in the trial? And do you think that will then be sufficient to have a look at how it's gone and learn for the years afterwards?
Yeah, so we're targeting 6 new spaces this year. with the aim of increasing that in the next financial year if all goes to plan. And so we feel that kind of gives us the right balance of scale in terms of being able to see whether we've achieved the benefits, also just to see whether it needs refining and you know what needs tweaking before we scale it up in the next financial year.
Okay, so I do need to read the official documentation. So this is a key decision and it affects more than one ward. So we as a committee are asked to, 1, approve the fostering sufficiency adaptation and extensions policy. 2, approve the use of 3.22 million ITS capital funding to deliver the foster carer capital grants scheme. 3, that we authorise the Executive Director of Children and Young People in consultation with the Chair of the Committee to take all the steps required to spend and the allocated capital to undertake adaptations and extensions to increase fostering sufficiency as outlined in the report. Number 4, authorises the Director of Children and Young People, Executive Director of Children and Young People in consultation with the Chair of the Children and Young People Committee to take all steps required to procure and award a contract for capital delivery consultants as required and in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget outlined in the report. And finally, number 5, that the committee authorises the Executive Director of Children and Young People to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contract or contracts being awarded up to the budget outlined in this report. I'm the mover of this report. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Okay, I'm going to take Andrew, thanks. Okay, so everybody in favour, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And I'm going to suggest we take a 10-minute break and come back at, 9 minutes according to my phone. So 25 to 7. Back online. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are moving on to agenda item number 10, which is the extension of the independent foster agency framework for 1 year, and it's very timely. I'm going to invite Gail Rogers to introduce the paper, and also the reason why it's really timely, and it's completely coincidental, but go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Gail Rogers, Head of Children's Commissioning. We're asking, the paper seeking to invoke a 1-year contract extension to the independent fostering agency contract and approve a budget of up to £15 million to spend on that for that 12 months, which will start in April through to March. This is as part of the South Central Independent Fostering Agency Framework, which 16 local authorities are part of that, and we call off from that. We've got a statutory requirement under Section 22G of the Children's Act to ensure sufficient high-quality accommodation for children in care, and independent fostering agencies is a key means by which the Council can comply with that duty. We've currently got approximately 800 children and young people in care, 525 who are placed in foster care setting, and of those, 182 are in our independent sector with foster carers with independent foster agency. So being part of the South Central framework, gives us a compliant route to be able to purchase placements in line with procurement regulations, and this will be the 4th year of delivery. The framework's got 115 foster agencies on it. Last year, the vast majority of our external foster homes were secured through this framework, with 253 placements on the framework compared to just 21 spot purchase arrangements. So it's a really strong reliance on the framework, and it's a really effective framework. It's beneficial being on that framework for us, not only for procurement reasons, but it makes sure that providers are signed up to our terms and conditions across the piece, and to uplift processes and the contract management and negotiation of that through a central holding point within that framework. So that, as I said, 16 local authorities, we've got a greater market share by being on that framework, and we're looking for agreement for up to 15 million of spend. Obviously, with a framework, you don't have to spend anything at all. There's anything up to that for 26-27. And that's really based on our usage that we've seen this year, plus a little bit of art to play with, I suppose, in case we see further placements being made. We've got, as part of our Families First programme, we have a programme aimed at stepping children down from residential care. So the cost of independent fostering, although it's a lot more expensive than our in-house fostering, is probably more than 3 times less than the cost of residential care. So one of our key ambitions through our Families First programme is that we bring children back to Bristol, where they are able to live either alongside family members or in fostering care, trying to step them down levels of care and levels of high cost. So use of that framework is obviously a really strong part of that programme and the means by which we can do that. So this is a key decision because of the additional spend. So it's seeking approval to extend just for 12 months. Within that period, we are seeing reforms come about, aren't we? And through the Josh McAllister work and the Schools and Wellbeing Bill, that there will be regional commissioning cooperatives introduced. And there are 2 already in the country that are piloting as pathfinders. One's in Greater Manchester, one's the South East. And there is funding just announced actually for areas to bid for further funding to become regional commissioning cooperatives. So it is likely that in time, all of the framework activity will come within some of the regional processes, and we haven't actually discussed scale and scope of that yet, but we are well placed to be doing that because we have been collaborating with South West colleagues, 14 local authorities calling ourselves South West Children's Alliance. Huge amount of work in place to begin to put a residential framework initially in place that will bring down costs and deliver greater sufficiency for children in the South West, which is one of the worst served areas in the country. But we need this extension of the contract for 12 months while we're looking at what comes next, I suppose. Can I hand over for questions?
Thank you very much. Anybody got any questions that they wish to follow up with this? Okay, start with Susan and then Shona.
Yeah, I've got a question about, we've got children that are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and there's 82 currently in Bristol, 52 living in supported accommodation, 24. Does that come out of Bristol City Council's children, young people's corporate parenting budget? So it's not supported by the government for us having asylum-seeking children. That was just a question. And you shook your head, so I get that. Then the other question I had was about spot purchasing. This threw me a little bit because it is due to us working in a buyer's market. Oh no, that is about us working in a buyer's market, and that just sounds really weird. That it's a buyer's market, that there are agencies and providers negotiating new prices at the time of arrangement coming into place, and that just sounds rather, what's the word? I don't know what the word is for it, but I bet you can imagine what the word is for it. That we're being forced into this buyer's market in children being fostered, and I just don't like it. And I don't know if what we're looking at today, it means that we are avoiding those spot purchasing of placements for children via a buyer's market?
Shall I start with that one, the buyer's market, and then go to the unaccompanied asylum seekers? Yes. Yeah. So, so the market is stacked in favour of providers at the moment. Fostering in particular, so where we see fostering numbers having fallen, and you've seen a really great initiative for us to try and bring that up. So all local authorities have seen their fostering numbers fall, and actually independent fostering agencies have also seen recruitment drop off. Numbers of children in care nationally has gone up quite significantly over the last 5 years, and there are fewer foster carers, whether they are in-house, local authority, whatever, and that does mean that there is a market, there has become a market around those private agencies in the same way that there is a market around the residential provision as well. Nationally, we've seen some quite high profits being taken out from some providers within that, and that's why we need to try to maintain frameworks, because we hold providers to a more, because of our spending power across a block, we hold providers to better costs, and we manage their their demands for inflationary uplifts and all those different sorts of things. So sadly, there is, and the Competitions Agency, and there's been a lot of reports around this. Sadly, it is a market at the moment where providers have a kind of upper share, which is obviously why we're trying to put our own children's homes in place and those things. Yeah, and I can address the asylum seeking question as well. Is that the Home Office give us funding for asylum seeking children that come to our area, so we get £1,000-ish a week for under 18s, and that drops significantly once those young people are 18 to £270 a week. So, which isn't sufficient to meet needs, but just about. But the £1,000 a week pretty well is, and most of these, so the providers on the fostering framework who are taking asylum-seeking children are generally taking them under that cost. So under £1,000 a week.
Okay, thank you. Shona, I think you were next.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely abysmal that people are making profit from children being in foster care. Wales has actually last year, it's introducing a law to ban profit making from foster care for children except in exceptional circumstances. It's the first UK nation that's done it. We could do something similar in England. There's currently fostering refreshment and changes being looked through, but I don't think that idea has come through in the English law changes yet, which is a huge shame. But just in terms, my question, was about the annual membership fee. On page 146, I was just slightly confused because it says we pay an annual membership fee for the South Central Framework, which is proportionate to the number of placements we call off the framework. And so I was a bit confused about how that works. Is it like that's something we pay at the end of the financial year? Is it something we estimate ahead of time? How do they calculate it? And is the reason that the framework's been going up is because we've been calling more and more placements off it, or is it just inflation?
Yeah, so it's based on it's based on the number of placements made over the last 2 years, I think, on a rolling basis. So, and it is proportionate to the number of placements that you make. You then pay it in advance of the next year. Framework fees have gone up less than actually some. So we saw in here that some of the costs, the uplift costs, have gone up, and that was in line with inflation, really. So, huge amount of inflation. Keeping providers on the framework are still at a that's lower than we get in spot purchase. So what we get for the membership fee is then the management of that framework, so the procurement work, any of the contract management, and also management around or oversight certainly of uplift and some central QA, quality assurance, but but actually a lot of the quality assurance is done then if the child is living in your area. We would send out quality assurance staff to have a look alongside of the agency.
I think it is in the Children's and Wellbeing in Schools Bill to introduce profit capping power on placements, including fostering placements in England. So there's a sort of legislation to impose profit caps, which I assume is the same as.
I think in
normally
Wales,
say that it's in the same place as Wales. I'm generally happy for Wales.
Yeah.
But I think.
I think Wales is maybe more progressive, that they're trying to cut out the profit making completely, but profit capping is still a step in the right direction. I think.
Yeah.
Katja, did you? Yes.
Yeah. My question was probably not is linked to the foster care sufficiency, but maybe not exactly the question we asked to vote on today. And it was about, are we doing anything other than advertising for new foster carers to try and get new foster carers for Bristol City Council? Because obviously that's the best way to go, is to have our own in-house foster carers. Are we looking at one of the problems, shall I rephrase it, are we looking at the problems as to why people aren't coming forward to be foster carers? To increase our sufficiency.
Our ability to increase our recruitment and our retention. We're doing lots of work, and as you can imagine, under our Families First programme that we've brought it before in terms of increasing the numbers of our foster carers. And obviously we look at that, our corporate parenting board as well, in terms of any initiatives, things that we're undertaking. We're going to bring that back to committee. We're going to pull together a report that looks at all our offers, what we're thinking about in terms of what we can provide for our foster carers, how we can make sure that we are attractive as City Council to people coming forward and have got an interest in fostering. So there's a number of initiatives that we are looking at, and we were going to pull it all together in a paper to come here to committee for you to see.
Yeah, that would be very interesting, because I was also hoping that the last one we voted on, would that also increase the number of people that might move from the agencies to us.
That is the last one that we report on. One of this, I think it is written in the report, that will make us more attractive, because our independent fostering agencies aren't able to offer that. Yes. But we can. Yeah. That's a good thing for us.
It's also about the support network that a foster carer gets, because looking after a child that has trauma, you need a huge amount of support, because it's therapeutic parenting. It's not, you know what I mean? There's extra. You have to have extras than an.
And you remember in the Families First, and I think I've talked about it here before, we've introduced the Mockingbird model.
Yes.
And we are increasing the number of units that we have in the Mockingbird. So that's been really successful, and we've had really positive feedback from our foster carers, and some really clear stories and examples of children that we have that have remained with their foster carers due to the support around them from the Mockingbird unit. So that's been really positive, and we are continuing to grow that.
Oh, that's brilliant news. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, mine's working. It's okay.
Oh, it's yeah. Sorry, it was my finger wasn't pushing it. It is working. Andrew, go ahead. Thanks.
I think we're all kind of appalled with the spot purchasing and the profit-driven motivation behind a lot of that. And is there a possibility that we can actually get out of spot purchasing altogether, or will there always be a need for it? You know, if we can increase our framework and our own in-house provision, could we actually get rid of spot purchasing? I suppose if there's an emergency situation, you might need spot purchasing, but it would be great if we could get profit motivation out of it altogether.
Yeah, that would be the aim, actually, to not have spot purchasing arrangements, and also to have fewer children, obviously, placed in out of area or external provision at all. So and the Families First programme is really looking at that end to end, both how children come in and how children are helped to supported step down and leave care. It will take a few years, and it would take the government to actually introduce things like price capping. I know they are looking in Scotland at accepting that, as well as, and the initiatives had slightly unintended consequences. In Wales, are now taking children from England. They don't have to comply with some of that. So it would take really a whole. It's probably a little way off, and our best bet at the moment is to try to hold people to framework conditions and prices whilst we develop our own capacity. And once we develop our own capacity, then providers will need to bring their costs down and work more quickly.
Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, sorry. This is where some people get really geeky about education funding, and I can get really geeky about procurement, because there are ways that we can use procurement regulations to our benefit, and spot purchasing is the last thing we should be doing, and we're making every effort to avoid doing it wherever possible. Frameworks are one really good way that we can do that. We can also look at block contracts with providers. We can look at our relationships with providers and how we kind of manage the market better. And we're bringing forward plans that you'll be hearing about at next committee to how we can really actively engage with the market to kind of build proper relationships with providers that hopefully hold them better to account, but also enable us to work with them in kind of more collaborative ways that should try and reduce kind of profiteering and enable us to kind of better manage that aspect of the market. The market will exist and it will aim to make profit. I mean, that is what a capital market does. But there are ways that we can better engage with it and ways that we can use procurement regulations to our benefit.
Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to... This is a key decision because it affects more than 2 wards and is well over £500,000. So I need to read the statements out. We are asked as a committee to 1, approve the 1-year South Central IFA framework extension, including our membership and call-off arrangements until March 2027. Number 2, approve the budget of up to £15 million to spend on foster care placements called off the South West IFA framework. And at number 3, it authorises the executive children in consultation with the chair of the CYP committee to take all the steps required to enact the 1-year South Central IFA framework extension and incur a spend of up to £15 million, including membership and call-off arrangements until March 2027. I'm the mover of the report. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Okay, Susan, thank you very much. Can everybody for the motion please raise their hands? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Which takes us on to agenda item number 11, which is the SEND Education Capital Programme. This is a huge piece of work. The purpose of the report is to seek endorsement of the programme and approval for delegated authority that will enable this to be delivered. Is a key decision because it's way over £500,000. And Sandra Roebuck, I've got you down, or are you doing it, Vic? Okay. Vic Verma then, going to start. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really genuinely delighted to be presenting the report today. This is culmination of a significant amount of work over the last year and probably longer to build the programme in a way that is presented to you today. So the SEND Education Capital Programme, councillors may recall in November 2025 we presented the school organisation strategy, which set out the need in the city for additional specialist provision for our children and young people, with an aim of 569 more places by 2030. And what it set out was that through this programme and the work that we've been doing, and you'll see in the paper, we see that 392 of those places need to be delivered through capital investment, and a further 177 can be delivered by working with the market that's there already. So our existing providers, predominantly our own settings, to produce another 177 places. And over the last year, we've managed to achieve 217 of those places already. So there's been some really good progress, but of course more to do. The programme set out include a range of new build, but also resource provision to promote inclusion in existing mainstream settings. And despite the reforms being announced last week, they're aligned to the reforms as we see it. We think these are places that are still needed in the city, and really that's underlined by the recently published 10-year education estate strategy, which was published by the DfE about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So 6 projects in the pack, and we've shared with you a kind of a glossier summary which will go out to families and be available on our local offer. But 6 projects which include Claremont and Kings Weston, a rebuild of that school, but also additional capacity, which is much needed. It's a school that's been struggling in terms of the quality of the building, but also presents an opportunity for us to have a really high quality education for those children. Briarwood Secondary in South, which will provide 84 additional places across multiple sites there. Elmfield School for the Deaf, which came to the committee, I think, over a year ago now for approval. Ground has been broken on that project, and that should complete by summer of 2027. St Anne's Infant School in Brislington West, which will produce 24 additional places, again by summer of 27. Henbury Court Academy with 30 additional places there as well. The Trim Valley Free School is a project that we have spoken about previously at committee. That is a DfE funded free school. We did receive communication from the DfE before Christmas to confirm that the project would go ahead, and we are continuing to chase them on getting going with this project. The current forecast completion is summer of 2029, and we are escalating the concern around whether that could be delayed, and that is a significant concern for us, given that it would produce 164 places, which are significant in this timescale as well. And I think just to close off, I think the funding for this programme has been put into the council's budget and the medium-term financial plan, and was approved by full council on the 12th of February. So there's provision for this funding. There may be future additional funding coming from the DfE, particularly with the announcements over the last couple of weeks. But for the moment, happy to take questions on the programme. And my thanks to the team who've been doing a huge amount of work on building this programme.
Thank you very much. So any comments or questions from anybody? I'll start with you. I just want, start with Shona and then Katya, but I'd want, this capital programme is over quite a long period of time, and whilst there is contingency built in there, particularly given what's going on in on the international context, there's a possibility that costs will increase, and we can never anticipate what is going to happen to the economy in 6 months or 12 months, let alone kind of the end of this programme. So I just want to sort of put that in there. However, we know that the needs of our children need these schools, and these places are needed, and that is before we've seen the rest of what's coming through with the current and whatever happens when it does implement the SEN reform. So it kind of takes all of those things into consideration, really. But Shona, you wanted to ask, and if you want to ask a question.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a huge piece of work, but incredibly needed. My question was about, I think it was the Elmfield School, because I think, am I right in saying that's the one, as you said, that we approved funding for before? So is this paper seeking additional funding for that specific project, or is it just sort of incorporated as like part of the wider plan, and you don't need any more funding for it, but you're just sort of including it to make sure that we're aware of it, basically.
Yes, that's correct. So that is part of the overall investment in this programme is £53 million, which is why it's coming to committee. Includes some of the projects that have been approved already, and then additional ask in terms of where there are new projects, particularly Claremont and Kings Weston, I think, which is the most significant in the programme.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wondered whether you could clarify about, this obviously talks about stopping the projects. Some of this capital funding is made through stopping projects reported to October 2025 committee. I just wonder if you could clarify remind us what those projects are that have been stopped and why they're no longer needed.
Yeah, of course. So there are, I think, 2 projects listed in the report which were stopped. Predominantly, these have been related to value for money. So there are some examples of projects here which would have cost somewhere between £2 and £3 million, for example, but would have only created a very small number of places. And as great an opportunity as some of those would be, we did determine that they probably weren't viable. I think one in particular is also on a PFI site as well, which brings its own complications in managing a scheme because of the overhead that PFI companies, similar to the private equity conversation we're having, bring when trying to do a development as well. So whilst they were great projects and we've had really good engagement with those schools, and also those schools have done some great work preparing for what that scheme might deliver in the future, we did have to stop some of these projects just predominantly on the basis of value for money, and reinvest those funds into the other parts of this programme.
And are you able to clarify which projects those were, which schools those were, and sort of when, can you remind us when that funding was initially approved? Like, how long did it sort of take us to realise this wasn't value for money?
Yeah, so I'm joined by Sandra Roebuck, who's Programme Director, and Oliver Roberts, who's Programme Manager, so I'll hand to Sandra on that one.
Yeah, so the original reporting on some of those projects was back in 2022. And one of the challenges we've had is obviously over that period, cost has gone up, not least due to externalities that Councillor Townsend mentioned around things that aren't in our control. We're not actually required to get approval to stop projects, but we have reported them in the public interest that we're not going ahead with some projects that we originally supported. So, as Vic said, there are a couple of ones listed in the paper here this evening. And then back in October, the committee also received a paper that highlighted a couple of other projects that we've paused or stopped. I won't perhaps list all those again now because they have been before the committee before, but just to echo Vic's comments that in making those decisions, we have engaged fully with those providers and continue to do so because clearly there are other opportunities across the portfolio that those providers could be involved with. And I think we've had pretty supportive feedback on the whole that we're working towards a sufficiency strategy that now does document where we want to go in the direction of travel. And I think the message out there is that providers, there needs to be a best fit with our criteria in order to deliver maximum value for money for the funding that we've got.
Thank you.
Katja.
I'm glad to see that the Claremont School is decanting. I think you said it was this summer, basically. So they're going to start their new school year in the new building for the prevalent future until the building is refurbished and rebuilt. That was one of the things that they were really concerned about. The other thing was, is it true that the Claremont School, just for clarification really, that they were looking at doing more children with SEND that have autism and those kinds of special needs compared to what they do now, which is in that particular setting, which is severely disabled children that have movement limitations in their movements?
Yes, so regarding Claremont, we are working towards a decant position for summer of this year, subject to receiving all the necessary information, but we're working very closely with the head teacher and the governors to achieve that. I think Claremont's an interesting one because over that sort of time period, that again was a project originally approved, I think, in 2022. We have seen a sort of change in needs and forecasting and direction of travel. So the project board that governs that particular project met a couple of weeks ago, and we have agreed that children with PMLD will stay within the Redland Green setting, which is what many of those children have already done. But that then also leaves us an opportunity to look at a whole range of different types of children to go back into the new school. So I think what we've seen is a project actually that was originally really purely related to suitability has now become much more interesting in the context of the wider programme, because it will offer a lot more places than was originally thought, and we've noted the 70 in the report. So that's a really exciting opportunity. Not without its challenges, because obviously, unlike many of the other projects, we, as you say, we do need to decant existing pupils into other settings to allow that to go ahead. But we're working closely with the governors and the head teacher to ensure that is as smooth as we can possibly make it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions from members? Okay, so there's quite a long list of things that I need to read out for this one. Obviously this is a key decision, and we are, as a committee, being asked to approve this, the SEND Capital Programme for 26 to 30, authorise the Executive Director of Children and Education in consultation with the Chair of Children and Young People's Committee to allocate and spend 12.9 million of additional funding to the projects identified in the report, authorise the Executive Director of Children and Education in consultation with the Chair of the CYP Committee to allocate 0.25 million of additional funding to the Trim Valley Special School to bring the total feasibility funding for that school to 0.69 million. Authorise the Executive Director of Children and Education in consultation with the Chair of the CYP Committee to accept future DFE grants received, which may be over the key decision threshold up to and including 2030, and to allocate funding to the SEND Capital Education Capital Programme up to the budget envelope outlined in the report. Number 5, authorise the Director of Education in consultation with the Chair of the CYP Committee to take all steps required to spend the additional 10.6 million of project funds for the Claremont School redevelopment project, including procuring, awarding and varying contracts over the key decision threshold up to the maximum values outlined in the report. Number 6, authorise the Director of Education in consultation with the Chair of the CYP Committee to take all steps required to spend the additional 2.3 million of project funds for Briarwood School projects, including procuring, awarding and varying contracts over the key decision threshold up to the maximum value outlined in this report. And 7, which is the last element, authorise the Executive Director for Children and Education to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contract or contracts being awarded up to the maximum envelope budget outlined in this report. So there's rather a lot in there. So I'm going to move the report. Have I got a seconder for this? Thank you, Katja. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. None against, none abstentions. So this is a huge amount of money that we're spending, and it is a key element of what not only this council's doing, but what this government is in the process of trying to do, which is to better meet the needs of children with those that have additional educational needs, and try to get a SEND system that actually functions to serve children. And as we go forward, we will bring back obviously updates with how these capital programmes are developing, because I am aware that of the importance, but also what might happen with some of over the coming 6, 12, however many months, what might be going on with these projects. So we will bring back regular updates in line with this. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Thank you very much, and see you next time, which I can't remember when that is, but it's about 6 weeks.
It's in April.
It's in April. There we go. Thank you very much.